Hi everybody. So this week I thought that I would stay in Inkscape and tell you a little bit more about how to work with the tools that it offers in order to make graphic design. The thing that I want to focus on this week is the difference between shapes and paths in Inkscape. Okay, so here we are in Inkscape. Let's say that we want to make a shape that's not a regular shape. In other words, not a square, not a circle, not a star, not a triangle. But let's start with a rectangle. So I'm going to click on the rectangle tool in order to use it. And if I click and drag and let go, I end up with this rectangle. If I want to change the color of it, I can choose one of the colors down here. Let's say this sort of grayish red. Here we have a shape. Now, what makes a shape a shape? More so than anything, it's starting with one of the shape tools. For example, you can use the rectangle tool in order to create squares or rectangles. You can use the ellipse tool in order to create circles or ellipses. And you can use the polygon tool in order to create stars and other kinds of polygons. Just to keep things simple, let's talk about the square tool or the rectangle tool. What I've created here is a shape. And when I use the selector tool, I can move it. I can go to the rotation handle and I can rotate it. I can rotate it back. I can skew it by using the skew handles. And that's all in the first set of handles that's available with the selector tool. If I click on the object again, you get resize handles. So I can click on the corner and resize. I don't have any constraining. I'm not holding down control on my keyboard or anything. I can reshape this by choosing one of these resize handles. But note, it still has parallel ends and it's still four sides. So the rectangle tool creates shapes that have parallel sides and four of them. If I go to the ellipse tool and I create an ellipse, and let's make it red, and go to the selection tool, same thing is true. I can resize, I can click again to get rotation handles, etc. Okay, so I've created two shapes using two shape tools, the rectangle tool and the ellipse tool. If I wanted to curve this edge, it would no longer be a rectangle. And so the shape tool only makes rectangles. And so in order to convert this into a path that I can manipulate, there is a function in Inkscape. And believe it or not, it's under path. And it is object to path. That's going to change these objects from shapes to paths. And one of the benefits of paths is that you can manipulate the lines and the points that make up what was a shape. A path is manipulable differently than something that is produced by one of the shape tools. Okay? I'm going to demonstrate this. If I select this rectangle and then go to path and choose object to path, this is no longer a rectangle. I'm going to undo that so that it is a rectangle again. The reason I want to do that is because I want to point out there is information in the bottom of the screen in Inkscape that's very, very useful. For example, when you have something selected, it will tell you what you have selected. And here I have rectangle and layer 1 selected. If I go to path and I choose object to path, that clue down there now says path for nodes in layer 1. And so it's important to note the difference and pay attention to whether you're working on a shape or a path and be able to do that conversion if you need to. One thing to note, you cannot go from path to shape. You can't go back from path to shape. You can only go from shape to path. And there are a lot of details about both shapes and paths that we're not going to get into in this video. I just want to give you the basics, the basic understanding. When I use the rectangle tool, I get a shape. When I convert it to a path, I get a path. And what can you do with a path? Well, as I said, you can manipulate a path differently than you can manipulate a shape. Now we're going to use the node tool in order to demonstrate how paths work. So I click on the node tool, and you'll see that I have special corners on this path now. The reason these corners are here is to remind me that this is a path, and then I can manipulate that path. So you can see I just grabbed that corner and moved it with the node tool, and now this is definitely not a rectangle anymore. It is a path that I have manipulated. Okay? So you can understand in graphic design, if you want to make a more interesting background, or you want to do something in order to fill space differently, it's important to be able to get precisely the shape that you want and not be limited to circles and squares and rectangles and ellipses. So it's good to be able to manipulate both. Both of them have values and benefits. So what else can I do with a path that I can't do with the same shape that we started with? I can grab one of the lines between those 2 points at the top, and I can grab it and shape it. And you'll see that I have this special handle here that appeared, and that handle allows me to play with that curve. For example, if I grab this node on this handle and pull it out, see how the path is changing? So if I raise that handle or lower that handle, there are changes that happen in that path. If I click on this corner, you can see that a handle just appeared. And I can take that handle and I can shape that side of the top of the path. Okay? Notice down here, if I click on this corner and move it, that handle doesn't appear. That's because it has no curvature. So if all of a sudden I curve this, see that handle appears, and I have the ability to manipulate the curve, right? So this is really useful, for example, if you're trying to make text follow a certain path. You can manipulate your path in order to create a guide and then fit your text to it. That's sort of an advanced topic. We'll probably delve into that at some later point, but paths are really, really cool. They are one of the core elements of graphic design using illustration tools. If you've ever used Adobe Illustrator, you know how important paths and nodes and handles are. Same is true in Inkscape. Now, if I go back to the selection tool and select our ellipse, we can see that this is still a shape because it says ellipse in layer 1. I'm going to click it again so I can rotate it a little bit, and I'm going to convert this to a path. And now, if I use my node tool, you can see that 4 nodes show up. And I'm going to show you another thing that you can do with node tool. You can double click on a line and create a new node. I can just create another node in order to change the curves and the position of the nodes for whatever my design is. And notice when I add this node here, it doesn't affect this node and it doesn't affect this node, it affects this area right here. Look at this handle, it has 2 ends to it. So I can take this handle and move it in, I can take this handle and move it out, and I can twist it. So imagine, for example, I was working on some kind of a cartoon character and I wanted to animate it. Animation is not possible in Inkscape, but a lot of work can be done for animation in Inkscape. And if we get around to looking at Krita, we'll see how you can use a workflow in Inkscape and a workflow in Krita in order to do your design inside of Inkscape and do your animation inside of Krita. So anyway, if I was creating some kind of a bird character or something, this might be the start of it. Whatever you decide to do in order to illustrate the character would be done using paths or shapes. This is all to say that both shapes and paths in Inkscape are incredibly powerful, and as we continue to learn how to use Inkscape, those concepts will be very, very useful. My suggestion is go ahead, open up Inkscape, play with these tools, create shapes, convert them to paths, play with the edges of the paths. You'll have the understanding of how to use shapes and paths, in order for you to understand the language of what we're talking about in future videos. I really appreciate your time in watching this. If you're watching this all the way through, I am certainly grateful. I hope you are having a great evening. It's a nice evening here tonight. Today was a pretty great day. And I hope that you're safe and you're well fed and you are comfortable. And in the event that I can do anything to help you, please reach out to me. I'm at lamazny@gmail.com. And I would love to talk with you about Inkscape or any of these other open source tools or graphic design or logos or whatever it is that you want to talk about. Thanks very much. Have a great night. Bye.